You're lost, Didushka.
I'm here about a certain girl. She got beat up pretty bad. I can give you $9,800.
For what?
Her freedom.
Uh-huh. I make this off this girl in 2 weeks. That girl is still a child. I still can sell her as virgin. You forget something?
16 seconds. 1,000.
Late at night in the city, Robert McCall walks beside a young girl named Alina when a car suddenly cuts them off. A Russian gangster, Slavy, storms out and grabs her, berating her for what she did to one of her customers. Alina tries to explain that the man hit her first, but Slavy isn't interested in explanations. Robert watches in silence as the gangster brutally slaps her, drags her toward the car, and forces her inside.
This girl, she's no good. Call this number. I send you another one.
As the vehicle tears off into the night, Robert stands there, unmoving, watching it disappear with a cold, unblinking stare. The next night, Robert returns to the familiar diner where he and Alina used to talk late into the evening. Their conversations were simple, mostly about the book he was reading, as he worked his way through a list of 100 books everyone should read before they die. But tonight, her seat is empty, and the quiet absence leaves him uneasy. When he returns again the following night, the manager finally tells him what happened. Alina was beaten badly and is now in the ICU at Csokas. Robert heads straight to the hospital, where he finds her lying in bed, bruised and crying, while a friend sits beside her trying to comfort her. When the friend steps out to grab coffee, Robert approaches and gently asks how Alina's doing. She's cautious at first, wanting to know who he is, but he assures her he's just a friend. Shortly after, she explains what happened. When Alina hit Slavy back after he struck her, he savagely beat her to make an example out of her.
I brought Teri over very young, and she got to the point where she thought her life could be hers one day. Slavy reminded her it never would be. He said he'd cut her throat next time. He said a whore who fucks and can't talk might be worth twice as much.
Back home, Robert sits alone with his thoughts. For days, he wrestles with the decision forming in his mind. He once promised his late wife that he would never return to being that kind of man again, and the memory of that promise keeps him awake through the night as he struggles with what to do. Elsewhere, Slavy arrives at his restaurant and heads upstairs to his office, where he collects money owed to him and pours himself a drink. That's when Robert quietly enters the room. The Russians are immediately suspicious, wondering how he managed to get up there, but Robert ignores them and walks straight to Slavy, placing the card he was given the other night on the table and calmly asking for the girl he was with. The thugs burst out laughing, mocking him as Didushka, Russian for grandpa, asking if he can even still get it up. Robert lets the insults run their course, then calmly offers $9,800 in cash for her freedom. Slavy accepts the deal with a handshake, casually remarking that he'll only sell her for 1 month. She's still a child after all, which makes her a prime earner.
Take your money and go back to your house and jerk yourself off 9,800 times, and then you come crawling back here to talk to me, huh? She will be used up by then for sure. Maybe then I will let you have it for nothing.
Robert slowly picks up the cash again, then rearranges 3 skull decorations on the table so they point directly toward 3 of the gangsters, before turning toward the door. But instead of leaving, he opens and closes it several times, then quietly locks it. In the stillness that follows, Robert studies the room, every face, every weapon, every position, absorbing it all with total awareness before murmuring to himself, 16 seconds, and starting his stopwatch. What follows is precise and surgical. Mr. Stopwatch steps forward, instantly disarms the first thug, snaps his arm, and shoots Slavy through the neck. The room erupts into chaos, but he moves through it with cold efficiency, dodging every swing, every blade, every desperate counterattack, as he dismantles the gang one by one with clean, controlled violence. When only one man remains, Robert calmly grabs a wine opener and waits. The thug lunges, and Robert drives the opener into him again and again before finishing with a brutal strike under the chin. Once the body collapses, he stops his watch. 28 seconds. He seems satisfied with the time. Then he surveys the room, taking in his handiwork, then walks over to Slavy, who's still clinging to life. Calmly, Robert starts yapping about how Slavy's heart is now beating 3 times faster as he bleeds out, and that he's about to suffocate to death. All over $9,800. With his last breath, Slavy asks who he is, but Robert doesn't answer. He simply continues counting, until the man dies, then quietly mutters that he's sorry. Later, back home, Robert washes the blood from his hands, then looks down at his wedding ring, and for the first time in a very long time, he sleeps peacefully. At home mart, Robert McCall moves quietly through the aisles, respected and well-liked by everyone around him. Two co-workers debate what he must have done before landing here. An insurance agent, maybe a stockbroker from Wall Street. But Robert cuts in and says he used to be a pip, a backup dancer for the legendary R&B group Gladys Knight and the Pips, even throwing out a few dance moves to sell the story. The joke lands and the workday rolls on. Later, another co-worker, Ralphie, the same one Robert has been helping train for a security guard test, hands him a carton of chips. Inside is a note that simply reads 247. Captain Obesity grins and explains he made the weight. Tomorrow, he takes the test, and it's all thanks to Robert. But that night, at home, Robert sits alone watching the news as reporters discuss the 5 men found dead in the office above the restaurant. Police sources say the scene carries all the signs of a violent turf war between rival criminal factions. Robert watches without reaction. Across the city, the Russian response arrives swiftly. A man named Teri, a higher-ranking figure in the mob, steps off a private jet and heads straight to the crime scene. Inside the room where Slavy and his crew were slaughtered, Teri studies the police photos, silently reconstructing the violence, each body, each wound, each angle of attack, imagining exactly how it unfolded. He's accompanied by corrupt cops who also work for the Russians. Looking over the evidence, they conclude it must have taken 2 or 3 attackers to wipe out the gang that quickly. But Teri isn't convinced. While scanning the building for nearby security cameras, one of the officers, Frank Masters, explains the restaurant's surveillance hard drives were removed, leaving them blind. Teri calmly demands footage from every camera within a 6-block radius and sends them a number to call if they have any trouble getting the footage. When he orders them to drive him home, Frank snaps, reminding him he's a guest in their town and shouldn't be giving orders. Teri pauses, apologizes politely for his tone, then explains the reality with chilling clarity. He's the man Mr. Pushkin sends when people like them fuck up. For years, they've taken Pushkin's money that comes with strict, non-negotiable conditions. And while Frank may think he matters, Teri assures him he absolutely does not.
And so we're clear. I'm not here to say, please. I'm here to tell you what to do. You're ready for business? We open tomorrow.
The next day at home mart, Ralphie doesn't show up for work. When Robert asks about him, the manager says Ralphie called in and quit. Robert quietly leaves and tracks him down at his mother's shop, where he finds him standing among the damage of a recent fire. Ralphie claims faulty wiring caused it, even though Robert suspects something else must have happened. He apologizes for wasting Robert's time and admits he never took the security guard test. This shop is all his mother has, and when something like this happens, he has to drop everything and help her out. Robert then meets his mother, offers to help clean up, and begins quietly putting the place back together. Meanwhile, Teri continues his search. He and Frank pull up to a site run by the Irish. Frank insists they've already checked them out and they had nothing to do with the killings, but Teri still wants a meeting. On the way inside, Frank warns him about one thing. Whatever happens, he shouldn't call the owner Little John. Inside, the Irish boss greets Frank with irritation, asking why they're working for Russians instead of sticking with him. Teri quickly cuts in, forcing the conversation forward. Frank explains they don't know who carried out the killings, but if the Irish had done it, they would have taken over everything and wiped the Russians off the map. Teri studies John and concludes he simply isn't smart enough to have pulled it off.
We pay you 15% to do business here. The additional 10% you steal, we ignore. We anticipated it, as you people are such cliches, and the fact that you're a rat to the feds is also tolerable, Little John. What the fuck? What we will not tolerate is getting nothing for our money. No information, no protection, no assurances. You understand, Little Johnny?
The insult pushes John to the edge until Teri suddenly smashes him across the face, forcing Frank to drop his bodyguards. Meanwhile, Teri continues the assault, even launching a brutal dropkick before pounding him into the floor again and again until he's satisfied. Outside, Frank snaps at Teri, furious that he just turned the city into a battlefield, but Teri shrugs it off. The beating wasn't about revenge or information. It was a message announcing his presence in town. Back at Ralphie's mother's shop, Robert quietly presses Ralphie again about what really happened. The truth finally slips out. The fire wasn't faulty wiring. Ralphie apologizes again, ashamed he wasted Robert's help and never even took the test. But Robert doesn't lecture him. He just listens, lost in thought. That night, Teri begins questioning Alina's friend, the same girl Robert spoke to at the hospital. Teri asks whether Slavy seemed agitated before his death or mentioned any problems. She says Slavi never discussed business around the girls. Teddy then asks about another girl from Slavi's stable who's missing, Teri, the girl we know as Alina. The friend claims she barely knew her and has no idea where she might be. Later, Teddy reports to Mr. Pushkin over the phone. When asked whether his message was received, Teddy confirms it was. He explains that every criminal group in the city, the Irish, Italians, Armenians, has denied involvement. Pushkin reminds him there must be no weakness and that this situation needs to end quickly.
Now enough of what you don't know. Tell me what you do know.
Meanwhile, at Ralphie's mother's shop, two corrupt cops sit inside finishing a meal before announcing the shop is closed. The old woman brings them an envelope full of cash and hands it over quietly. They remind her that as long as she pays on time, there won't be any problems. As they leave, they mock her, suggesting she wipe the grease off the walls before it catches fire again, making it clear they were the ones who torched the place. Out back, the officers step into the alley, only to find a man shining a flashlight directly into their faces. It's Robert. Calmly, he says he'd like to report a crime. They brush him off, telling him to call 911, even joking as they walk away that they should have shot him instead. But once they're in the car, one of them receives a phone call from Robert. Realizing the man behind them is the caller, they reverse and confront him. Robert shows them a video of the two officers threatening a shop owner to burn down his store, exactly the way they did to the old woman's shop. When Robert confirms that's the only copy of the video available, they slam him against the wall and search him. Calmly, Robert asks them to return the money they extorted from those poor people, but the fools just laugh and threaten to drown him in the Mystic River instead. That's when the situation flips. In seconds, Robert disarms both men and drops them to the ground, then calmly lectures them about protecting the public, serving the community, and upholding the law. When he's finished, he unloads the gun and leaves them with a simple choice. By tomorrow, they'll return every dollar they stole and personally tell those shop owners it will never happen again. If they do, the video disappears forever. And unlike most of the men Robert deals with, these two decide to do the right thing and return the money. With Ralphie's mother finally back above water, Ralphie returns to work at Home Mart, earning a quiet smile from Robert. Across the city, Teddy continues pressing Alina's friend, uncovering that she lied about how close she and Alina really were. Cornered, she finally admits the last time she spoke to Alina was at the hospital more than a week ago. When Teddy pushes further, she remembers something else. A nice black man had visited that night, asking how Alina was doing. After that, no one saw her again. Teddy studies her as she trembles, sobbing that she's telling the truth. He fetches her a glass of water, waits patiently while she drinks, then resumes taunting her before calmly choking the life out of her as she begs for mercy. Elsewhere, the employees at Home Mart are outside playing baseball. Robert snatches a ball clean out of the air for an out, drawing cheers from the team. As the noise fades, he notices Ralphie across the field in his new security guard uniform, and the two exchange quiet nods. No words needed. Meanwhile, Teddy gathers his group and reveals what he's discovered. By matching the arrival and departure times of everyone inside the restaurant, he identified a man who entered shortly after Slavi arrived, but never came out. He holds up the frame from the security footage. It's Robert. Back at Home Mart, Robert approaches Jenny the cashier to process a quick refund, but walks straight into a robbery. An armed man has Jenny frozen behind the register. Calmly following the gunman's orders, Robert hands over the cash in the register. Still unsatisfied, the thief demands Jenny's wedding ring. She pleads with him, explaining it belonged to her mother, but he raises the gun and threatens to shoot her. Robert studies the man quietly. The gun, his stance, his clothes, calculating. Then a child suddenly walks into the store. Robert immediately changes course and tells Jenny to give the ring to him. As the gunman leaves, Robert follows him outside just long enough to catch the license plate as the car speeds away. After giving a statement to the police, Robert drifts down one of the aisles and lifts a sledgehammer from the shelf. The look in his eyes says everything. At the same time, Teddy is tracing Robert's movements through the city, tightening the search. The next morning, Jenny opens the register and finds her wedding ring neatly placed inside. Nearby, Robert quietly wipes blood from the sledgehammer before returning it to its proper spot. That night, Robert sits folding a napkin when he hears movement outside his door. He rises, starts his stopwatch, and opens it, only to find Teddy standing there, instantly slipping into the role of a police officer. He explains they're checking with anyone who might have seen something suspicious that night at the restaurant. When Teddy asks why Robert was there, Robert answers simply, he likes the pierogi and was meeting a friend who never showed up.
But she won't be any help. She wasn't there. Daughter had a fever.
You didn't stay long.
I didn't check my watch.
Teddy then produces a photograph, the lifeless face of Alina's friend, and asks if Robert recognizes her. Robert says he does, but can't remember from where.
Don't you want to leave me your card, officer? case I remember anything. That's what you policemen usually do, right?
Must have given them all out.
How'd you find me? I paid cash. We didn't have a reservation. How'd you find me?
That's what we do, Mr. McCall.
We who?
We find people we need to find.
We.
After Teddy leaves, Robert stops the watch and moves to the window, watching the mobster. Outside, Teddy tells Detective Frank that everything about that man feels wrong. Soon after, one of Teddy's men tails Robert through the city, snapping photos as Robert buys supplies from a store. Robert, meanwhile, begins quietly preparing for what he knows is coming. When one of Teddy's men pulls Robert's official file, listing a simple background and civilian career, Teddy dismisses it immediately as fabricated. Whoever this man really is, they need to take him alive, somewhere, without cameras. Teddy wants to know who someone with those skills works for. Later that night, Robert sits in his favorite diner reading when a man dressed as a power line worker walks in and places an order. Robert calmly remarks that he probably doesn't actually work power lines. His hands don't look like
that.
it.
I know we gotta be waiting for somebody else.
Oh, fucker.
Outside, Teddy and the others watch through the window as the undercover gunman stands and begins approaching Robert. At that exact moment, a large truck rolls between them and the diner, obstructing their view. In the instant the sightline disappears, Robert slams his book into the man's face and knocks him unconscious before triggering a power outage. When the truck moves away, the diner is quiet, and Robert walks out alone with a swagger only Denzel could pull off. Crossing the street, he casually photographs Teddy and his entire crew. As Robert disappears around the corner, Teddy and the others rush after him. At the back of the building, Teddy spots blood on the wall, suggesting Robert is injured. In the alley, Robert suddenly ambushes one of the men, beating him down before noticing the badge clipped to his belt, a cop. Robert quickly takes his phone and vanishes into the night just as Teddy and the rest arrive, finding nothing but silence. Following this, they head straight to Robert's home and break in. Meanwhile, Robert sits in his bathroom, quietly treating his wounds. The Russians storm through the house and kick open the bathroom door, finding nothing but running water. From another apartment, Robert calmly watches them through a Twitch stream on his computer. The thugs search the house, finding motion sickness pills, travel items, and a plane ticket to Mexico purchased 2 days earlier. They assume he knew this was coming and ran, but Teddy shakes his head. Robert isn't running. He is watching them. Then, he orders the men to find him, or he'll bring in people who can. Down the street, Robert watches their cars pull away. Knowing the hunt isn't over, he drives to see an old friend from his DIA days. After sharing a quiet bowl of soup, Susan tells him she's no longer with the agency and can't help, but Robert insists he only needs information about the man in the photograph.
How is it to you?
That's why I'm here, trying to find out.
Tell me what's going on, please.
While Susan gathers info on Teddy and his crew, her husband points out to Robert that he had a great funeral. Turns out, he staged his death years ago with a car bomb, but Susan never believed it. She always said if anyone could find a way out of that life, it would be Robert. So, learning he was alive didn't surprise her at all. Soon after, Susan returns by helicopter with answers. Robert didn't kill 5 pimps. He hit the East Coast hub of Vladimir Pushkin, a powerful oligarch deeply embedded with the Russian mafia. Pushkin finances everything: weapons, fuel, trafficking networks. His criminal empire runs along the entire U.S. coast, protected by political connections and untouchable money. And the man Pushkin sends when something goes wrong is Teddy Renson, real name Nikolai Ichenko, a former secret police commander who went private after the collapse of the system. Brilliant, methodical, and essentially a sociopath with a business card. She also reveals something else. The 2 corrupt cops Robert roughed up earlier have been on Pushkin's payroll for 3 years. Now they're dead, found stuffed in the trunk of their car in the precinct parking lot.
Suffocated, testicles blown off and shoved down their throats. Classic Russian mob hit. Teddy's work.
And the third one, Detective Frank Masters, has been missing for days. Susan warns Robert that Teddy will not stop until he kills him and anyone he cares about. Later, she asks Robert why he involved himself in Alina's life in the first place. But Robert says he can't fully explain it. Sometimes someone does something unspeakable to a person you barely know, and you act simply because you can.
Because it's who you are, and you've always been. Sometimes we make the wrong choices to get to the right place.
Susan then mentions Vivian, Robert's late wife, and says that when she died, a part of Robert died with her. But not the part she loved most. That part is still there. He just has to go be that man again. When she returns to the house and her husband asks whether she helped him, She only replies that Robert didn't come for help, but came for permission. The next morning, Detective Frank Masters hears his car alarm blaring outside his home. He goes downstairs to investigate and eventually walks into the garage, where he notices a pipe running into the car. Before he can react, Robert appears from behind and takes him down with surgical precision. Minutes later, Frank is seated in the driver's seat, handcuffed to the steering wheel with the doors locked. Robert starts the engine, and exhaust smoke begins filling the car. After letting the fumes build, Robert lowers the window and asks Frank about Pushkin's operation. When Frank responds with insults, Robert closes the window again, and smoke fills the car once more. They repeat the process again and again until Frank finally breaks, agreeing to take him somewhere. Soon, they arrive at a warehouse hidden inside a meat processing plant, one of the places where the Russians store their money. Frank tells the manager, Andre, that the location has been compromised, and they need to move everything immediately. When Andre demands to know who Robert is, Robert claims he's just the new guy, and that Pushkin ordered the move. As suspicion fills the room, Robert asks to see Andre's gun, and after briefly pointing it at him, Robert disarms him and turns the weapon back, triggering a tense standoff with the entire crew. Then orders Andre to tell his men to drop their weapons and lie down. Not long after, Robert is seen handing out stacks of money to the Nigerian workers, informing them the operation is finished and they're all going home, then orders Frank to call it in. Afterward, Robert presses Frank to hand over his escape plan from the Russians.
You know what? You motherfucker. You have me so fucking bad. You did this, you motherfucker.
You hear yourself? You did it to this badge, Frank. Disrespected this badge. You understand me?
You motherfucker. I got nothing, all right? I got fucking nothing. I'm a dead man. I won't last a week.
Then do the right thing. Do the right thing, Frank.
Realizing he's officially cooked and hoping to do one last good deed, Frank eventually gives up the location of a safe deposit box. Inside, Robert finds a passport and a flash drive. Back at the warehouse, police arrive and arrest Frank. As they search deeper into the building, they discover the Russian crew tied up inside a room stacked floor to ceiling with pallets of cold, hard cash. Elsewhere, inside a quiet restaurant, Teddy sits on the phone with one of his men. They've searched the entire city and still can't find Robert. Pushkin has already been notified. When the call ends, the man across from him assures Teddy his people will find him, then excuses himself to the bathroom. Moments later, Robert returns the man's broken, blood-stained glasses to the table and calmly takes the empty seat across from Teddy. Robert asks if Teddy's had enough, because he can keep going, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, body by body, or Teddy can call his boss tonight and shut the entire operation down.
That's not much of an offer.
That's the only one you're gonna get. When you pray for rain, you gotta deal with the mud, too.
Teddy studies him and asks what Robert sees when he looks at him. When Robert doesn't answer, Teddy explains it himself. He feels nothing toward him. Robert isn't a man to him, just something to remove, like a piece of lint or a bottle cap. Robert responds with a story. Years ago, a police captain told him about a case involving a respected scholar living in Moscow. The man already had 5 children, yet still opened his home to a 12-year-old orphan, a troubled boy beaten down by the system, violent and lost. When the boy stole from him, the man forgave him. When he failed in school, the man showed patience. When the boy lied, cheated, fought, and lashed out, the man answered it with compassion until eventually the boy, who had never known kindness, finally felt what it meant to be loved. Then 1 week later, an intruder broke into the house and shot the man and his wife in their bed. Some small items were stolen, things a child might take, but no one ever knew for certain. The children were sent away to relatives, and the orphan was shipped back into the system. Just as he had finally been given a chance at life, it vanished with 2 bullets. Teddy quietly notes that it's a well-known story, and the killer was never caught. Robert replies that maybe the investigators simply looked in the wrong direction. Maybe the boy himself killed them, terrified that one day his foster parents would realize he wasn't worth it and throw him away like everyone else had, like a piece of lint or a bottle cap. Unable to bear the thought of that moment coming, he made sure it never would. Teddy listens without reaction, then calmly explains that Robert doesn't really know him. He's not a sentimental man. He's never understood what comes from feelings like that, except weakness. Robert shifts the conversation back to business. Before killing each of Teddy's men, he gave them a chance to walk away, but they made their choice. Now, Teddy gets the same opportunity. Robert then writes down his number and tells him to call when he decides.
I've done some bad things in my life, Nikolai. Things I'm not proud of. I promised someone that I love very much that I would never go back to being that person. But for you, I'm gonna make an exception. You asked me what I saw when I looked at you. What do you see when you look at me?
After that mic drop, Robert stands up and leaves. Back home, Robert plugs the flash drive he recovered from Frank's safe deposit box into his computer. Inside are documents, names, dates, and payment records detailing millions funneled to corrupt politicians to protect Pushkin's operations. Another archive reveals the Russian Knights escort network, the trafficking pipeline that trapped girls like Alina. Robert forwards everything to an FBI agent's personal email. Digging deeper, he finds something else. Shipping records for oil tankers running from Vladivostok to Boston under the name Great Eastern. Robert heads to the harbor and rigs explosives across the tankers. Moments later, the harbor erupts in fire and thunder as the fleet detonates, crippling Pushkin's oil smuggling pipeline and tearing a massive hole through the funding that powers his empire. Elsewhere, Teddy reports directly to Pushkin, who is furious that the man destroying his operation is still alive, and now his oil tankers are burning. Teddy assures him he has a new team and will handle it immediately, but Pushkin continues raging that New York operations have already been shut down, and he's lost tens of millions of barrels in a single day. Before ending the call, Pushkin gives a final warning: stop the bleeding, or don't bother coming back.
Пошел ты нахуй.
Reviewing Robert's photos, Teddy notices Ralphie standing beside him. Soon after, he arrives at the shipping port and calls Robert with an offer, a trade, Robert's life for theirs. When Robert asks whose, a second call comes through. It's Captain Obesity, tweaking that armed men stormed the store while they were closing. Teddy calmly informs Robert that his men will kill them in 30 minutes unless he reaches the port in 29. Robert soon boards a bus heading toward the location while Teddy tracks his phone the entire time. As the bus approaches the port, Teddy orders his men to shoot Robert on sight. But when the bus comes into view, no one is on board. Only Robert's phone remains on the seat. Realizing he's been played, Teddy orders one of the hostages executed. As the gunman prepares to pull the trigger, music suddenly blasts through the building speakers. One of the men drags Captain Obesity to the PA office to shut it off. When the music stops, he catches a glance of Robert on the security monitors and steps out to investigate. At the doorway, Robert strikes first, seizing the gun, snapping his neck, and dragging the body back into the office. Inside the hostage room, Ralphie demands to know what's happening and who these men are, but Robert says nothing. Moments later, the remaining thug receives a radio call and steps outside to check. As he scans the warehouse, Ralphie distracts him just long enough for Robert to smash him with a fire extinguisher, dropping him cold. Robert immediately orders Ralphie to lead everyone out through the service doors. Not long after the hostages escape, Teddy enters through the front entrance and announces he's come personally to see Robert, but Robert's response is simple: he'll be waiting. As Teddy orders his men to sweep the building, Robert kills the power and locks every exit, sealing the building and trapping them inside with him. Moving through the darkness, he begins turning the hardware store itself into a battlefield, rigging traps from whatever tools and equipment lie within reach. One by one, the men fall as Robert hunts them through the aisles. In the chaos, Teddy manages to graze him with a bullet. After retreating briefly, he cauterizes the wound against a red-hot doorknob before returning to the hunt and driving a drill straight into another man's neck. Then he disappears into an office nearby and crouches behind a table as another gunman storms in, firing wildly through the room. Robert lunges from behind him, stabbing him with a shard of glass. Then the two crash into a brutal fight, the larger man slamming Robert hard to the floor until Robert drags the thug's face across the ground, littered with shattered glass. Meanwhile, Teddy closes in, drawn by the noise echoing through the dark building. The fight reaches a stalemate before Robert snatches another shard and buries it into the man's neck, and the body collapses. Robert lies there catching his breath until Ralphie appears and helps him to his feet. As they move towards safety, Ralphie is shot in the leg and starts bleeding calories. After taking cover, Robert steadies him and gives precise instructions. Reach the breaker box and restore the lights in exactly 40 seconds. Then he hands Ralphie his watch and the two separate. Robert lures one of the remaining men toward the cafeteria while Teddy follows the trail of Ralphie's blood. As the thug steps inside the room, the lights suddenly blaze back on. A bomb hidden inside the microwave detonates instantly, engulfing the man in an explosion. Now only Teddy remains. He reaches Ralphie first and raises his gun to finish him, but a shot tears through his arm. Robert steps out of the shadows holding a nail gun and fires again and again, driving nails deep into Teddy's body as he screams, demanding to know who he is. But Robert offers no answer, and the final nail punches through Teddy's neck, dropping him where he stands. Following this, Robert turns and walks away while Captain Obesity watches in stunned silence. 3 days later in Moscow, Vladimir Putin steps out of the shower inside his mansion when the window blinds suddenly drop shut. As he emerges into the room, Robert calmly instructs him to wrap the towel around himself and stay where he is. Pushkin quickly realizes who he's facing, the man who's been dismantling his empire back in Boston. When Pushkin asks what Robert gains from killing him, Robert gives a single answer: peace.
Peace is expensive to buy, but I can purchase it for you. What is your price? Are you there?
As Pushkin reaches for the sink, he doesn't notice the exposed wire Robert left waiting beside the running water. The moment he touches it, electricity surges through him, killing him instantly. As Robert leaves the mansion, the path behind him reveals the bodies of every guard he silently eliminated on his way in. Sometime later in Boston, Alina steps off a bus and spots Robert nearby. She calls out to him, explaining she's been coming by the last few days hoping to run into him. As they talk, she tells him the stitches come out next week and that she's started reading now. She's even found a real job with real hours. Then she mentions something else. When the hospital returned her belongings, there was an envelope with her name on it. Inside was nearly $10,000 and a ticket out of town. She shrugs it off as probably hush money, but smiles anyway. Whatever it was, it gave her the chance to start over, and she's taking it. Robert listens quietly, satisfied just to see her standing there, alive, healing, and moving forward.
Someone once told me I could be whoever I wanted to be.
Body, mind?
Spirit. I'm gonna miss your stories, Robert.
Got your own then.
Thank you for everything.
Having saved Alina from her old life, Robert slips back into his usual routine. But this time, as he sits in the diner, he's reading a reply to the Craigslist ad he posted. Someone out there is asking for help, and that tells you everything. Robert may have found a little peace, but he is still exactly who he is: quiet, alert, and always watching.